Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Katie, I'm a full-time artist, and today I'm going to be doing another daily art recap. So I'm now on to weeks 38 and 39, and this is a challenge which I started last August, where I'm drawing 6 days a week, and I share that over on my Instagram. And here on YouTube I do a bi-weekly recap where I talk through what I've been creating and a little bit more of my thoughts behind each piece. So in week 38 I actually did some large paintings, and I really feel like they've changed my process and it's all very exciting. I feel like painting big has really changed the way my brain works when I come to creating artwork, and that's really exciting to me because I feel like it's really pushed my style forward. So the first piece I did was this one, which is a piece which I did just on scrap paper. So this is from a roll which I then taped up onto the wall. And it's of a view in the New Forest. So I did a recce because I've got an exhibition coming up in August and I really wanted to find some views to paint, and I pulled over and I took a photo of this scene which was just along the side of the road, and I really love these types of trees with the really long trunks, and when I came to painting it just really took me and I really wanted to try it. And I really wanted to try it big, so I started with a base layer of light pink, which is a mix of house paint, which I just found in the garage, and some red acrylic, and then I went over the top with more acrylic. So I've been using acrylic for the larger paintings just because it's a lot cheaper, so I don't need to worry about being tight, about worrying about the amount of material I use. So gouache is a lot more expensive, so I feel like I'm definitely more aware of that when I'm painting. So I've been mixing up a lot of acrylic in little tubs and in like little old takeaway tubs and sealing the lid on that so I can reuse it again. And also like just mixing on old ice cream tubs and sweet tub lids, because that's been a really nice way for me to keep my looseness, because I don't have to worry about using a paper palette and only having a certain amount of space. I can just use all these different plastic tub lids and just go crazy with the colours. This one turned out quite muted in the end, but I'm really pleased with this, and it definitely made me really excited to continue painting big, and so I did do that for a few more days. One of the things I love is the texture, and that's achieved by using a really big brush. So for the background I used just like a wall painting brush, so not like an artist brush at all, and you can kind of see the strokes in the sky. And then I went back to the artist brushes and used a reasonably big flathead brush for a lot of these marks. And apart from the fence where I added in the smaller, more refined details, that was the only brush I used. And I did film the process, but that's only available on my Patreon, or if you want to see a quick snippet, then I did film a reel and I'll link that down below. But I was really pleased with this one. I really love the tones and the colours of it all, and it definitely paved the way to my next few paintings, and it really made me want to experiment some more. So day 223 I did paint big again, but this time I used some A3 paper. So the other one is more like A2, but I just ripped that from a roll of paper, so it's not a specific size. Whereas this one I took from a sketchbook which uses this canvas paper, so it's really floppy and thin, but has a really nice texture. And it was funny because to me this felt small after working on that larger piece, whereas this is bigger than I normally paint. And this is again another view in the New Forest. This was taken in the winter, so earlier in the year when I went on a walk. So you can really see that reflected in the colours. But I wasn't sure at this one at first. My main experiment with this one was using a different background colour. So you can see this is obviously very orange based, and I did a layer of acrylic which was mixed with some gesso to create the orange base layer, and then I went over the top with more acrylic. With this one I wanted to experiment adding more detail, so I didn't create as much detail in the first one, and so I wanted to try more in this one. So I used a wider range of brushes, and I still kept like the looser marks, and that was my main aim with this one, with painting big, was to really be playful with my brushes, keep it nice and loose, but still not have it like super abstract. I used a lot more colours, and I think there's a lot more texture in this one, especially down the bottom with all those colours on the ground. But I also added the fence in as well, so that kind of mimics the first one. And I feel like you can really see it developing. I added a lot more pencil detail and Neocolor detail on this one compared to the first one. And I definitely prefer the first one, I think, but I was still pleased with this one because it does feel like I've learned something from it. And it was really interesting trying to add details onto this painting at this size because I'm so used to working at A5. For day 224, I actually went small again, so I went into my A4 Talon Sketchbook. And for this one, I wanted to experiment using the larger marks from the big paintings into a smaller A5 area. And I wasn't very happy with this one, but it did really well on Instagram, which I was surprised at. But I do like the playfulness of these. So it's the same view, and I got this view from Google Maps, and all of my references are linked down below. But for this one, it's the same view but slightly shifted, so the one on the right is a little bit further to the right of the view. And I used the leftover paint from my bigger experiments from the day before, and I really wanted to try and emulate the playfulness and the big loose marks. So again, I used the orange backgrounds, and I think I did that when I put the big orange background in the first one. In the day before, and then I put that in my sketchbook to come back to on this day. And then I mixed some more greens and blues, and I kept the sky really loose, so you can see there's big marks there, and I haven't blended anything. I've kept it really basic, and like you can see, I've really lent into just moving the brush to create some of these like wiggly marks, and I think that works really nicely. It's definitely a lot more loose than I'm used to, especially in like the little lighthouse details, but you can see on the sea I've added in a bit of details as well. So I've been really enjoying adding these lines on here, so I've added that in so it still feels quite me. And I do like the warmth that the orange brings to this page, and I also really like some of the Neocolor details I've added on. But I think that helps just to draw your focus into the foreground as well. So although I don't love this spread, it was a really good experiment, and I really did enjoy using the paint in this way and like really playing with it. It felt like it was very fun for me, and definitely something that I've learned a lot from. Day 225 I don't have to hand because this was another really big piece, and we've actually framed it, so it's in our lounge at the moment, and you know that I'm quite pleased with it because I frame it, and I very rarely hang my art for display in the house. But this one was referenced from a copyright-free image, and this is of Scotland. And I was really taken by the photo because of the colours, and I really loved the house in the background with the lake in the foreground and then the mountains behind. And it just has like everything that I want in a picture to then paint. And this one was definitely and is probably one of my most ambitious paintings. It was very large again. I think it's about A2 size, so similar to the first one, which I've just ripped from a roll of paper. And it took basically almost all of the day. Most of my daily art pieces are quite quick. They usually take, I'd say, about an average of an hour, unless I'm doing like super quick pieces. And the other two paintings actually didn't take very long at all, the larger ones, whereas this one did. And it's because I really wanted to see how I could create the same like brush strokes and like the bigger format and merge it with my more detailed style. So I really wanted to play around with like adding really refined details. So from the two bigger paintings, I kind of kept going in terms of adding more and more detail, and I feel like in this one I really merged the style that I usually use for like my panel pages into like the large format paintings, and I'm really happy with it. I love the details. I'm really happy with the rocks in the foreground and the water. I definitely feel like I lost it a little bit in the top half. There's like not much I can add there. There's not much to the sky I can add, and like the building can only have so many details in. So I definitely prefer the bottom half of this piece, and it kind of feels very realistic for me. There's just something about it that really feels really 3D, and I'm just really pleased with the textures that I created here. And overall as a piece, I think it works really nicely and definitely something I want to do more of. And I'm thinking this is what the style of my exhibition pieces might be like in August, and I'm just really excited to paint big again. So that's kind of the end of my bigger paintings for these couple of weeks, because for day 226 I actually did a plein air drawing in my A5 sketchbook. And you know, when I've talked about plein air before, I don't love the results, and it's the same for this one, although I do feel like I'm getting closer to merging my studio style with my plein air paintings. So this was done at a nature reserve, and there were a lot of lakes there, but I really didn't feel like painting lakes. I don't love painting lakes when I'm plein air, because I don't feel like I can capture them right. So although those were very pretty views, I actually just kept climbing up the hill, and I found this view of this tree. And it was the tree that excited me, so it was the tree that I drew. The lakes just didn't spark my creativity that day, so I wanted to do something that really made me want to draw it. And it was quite a warm day, so it was nice to just sit there and paint. And I've always said that I love the process of plein air painting, even though I don't like the result. So this one feels really peaceful for me. I really love the muted tones, and it definitely feels like I'm getting closer to getting it how I want, but it definitely needs more practice. I'm pleased with the contrast of the tree and the fence details, and I definitely enjoyed using my paint for this one. A lot of the times I'll just use pens and pencils for my plein air pieces, so it was nice to use my paint in a way that I feel comfortable with outside. And yeah, I like this one because of the muted tones and how calm it felt when I was painting it, and I also feel like I'm getting closer to where I want it to be. Day 227 is in my small 12cm square sketchbook by My A4 Talon, and this was the very last day in my Pacific Coast Highway road trip. So this is a project I've been doing for the past 6 weeks or so, where I'm travelling down the Pacific Coast Highway in California and sharing the views that I draw on my Instagram. And a couple of weeks in, I actually turned it into an interactive road trip, so I've been putting polls on my story and having my audience vote for what I draw. And that's been really fun, and I've really enjoyed it, but I didn't want it to go on for too long. Obviously, with something like this, you could draw a lot. You could really fill a whole sketchbook with some of those views. And on this day, we made it to our destination, which was LA, and obviously there's so much I could have drawn, but I wanted to keep it quite simple. I didn't want to overwhelm myself, and I didn't want the project to keep going and going. I feel like I got to a point where I was happy with where it was, and I didn't want to push it into a place where I wasn't enjoying it anymore. So I kept it simple, and for this one I drew the Hollywood sign, and then I can't remember where this is, but I'll pop that on screen. And these are very simple for me. They're in the style I've done for all the other ones in this road trip series. So it's quite muted, but I did try and add a bit of colour here, and I was a bit worried when I added this lilac on that it wouldn't work, but I think it works really nicely, and I feel like this page is nice and balanced. And then, because it was the very last one, I wanted to do another spread, and this time we went house shopping in LA, and we did a house in Bel Air and a house in the Hollywood Hills. So these ones are a lot quicker. These are obviously a bit more messier than the original spread, but I wanted to keep it quite loose. Obviously I get these done in a relatively small time frame, and I want it done in that day. And I also have to wait for like the poll results to come in and everything. So these are a lot looser, but I do like the style of these, and it was a really nice way to draw some buildings as well, and definitely buildings which are out of my budget if I was actually shopping. And it was nice to like pretend that we were house shopping and draw these buildings which I would never usually pick. So I'm definitely going to be doing another road trip series, but I'm having a little break. But I had so many suggestions for where to road trip next, and they are really fun. I really enjoy the interactivity and like making it a trip for everybody. So I'll be doing another one soon on my Instagram. On to week 39 now, and day 228. Again, I'm in the A4 Talon Sketchbook, and this time I did some 15-minute panel drawings of some National Geographic images. So these are referenced from my own National Geographic magazines, which I bought at a car boot sale, and I spent 15 minutes on both of these, and I definitely prefer the one on the right of the redwoods. I really enjoy painting these big tree trunks. I love the texture on them and like the way the brown balances with the green. And I think I'm just disappointed with the one on the left because it feels like there's not much to it, and when I look at it now, I feel like I could have done a lot more with those 15 minutes. It feels quite simple for the amount of time I had on it. Even though I know 15 minutes is very long, I do tend to draw very quick anyway. So for me, I feel like I could have added a lot more. To me, it's quite simple and boring, but I do like some of the texture on the lake, and also I like that I've added the weeds in the foreground because I think that adds a bit of distance to the background. But I definitely prefer this one. This one feels like it's got a lot more atmosphere, and this is the nature scenes I always enjoy drawing, and I feel like that comes through. I also really like that there's a little man down there in the bottom, which obviously shows the sense of scale. And to me, this just feels more me than this one. But they were very quick, 15 minutes each, so a nice way to fill a page in my sketchbook, and I do always enjoy drawing from National Geographic magazines. Day 229 is in my A4 Talon Sketchbook, and this was quite a quick one where I just used acrylic paint to fill up this spread. And like I said, this was quite simple. I actually started with gouache, so I used my Himi gouache palette for this one, and then I realised I wanted it really vibrant and a bit more loose, so I decided to switch to acrylics. And most of this is acrylics now, apart from this field here. This and the rocks and the water is acrylic, and I really love the texture it gives compared to gouache. It's obviously a lot thicker and a lot more vibrant, and again, I can be a bit more free with it. So I find working bigger, I prefer to use acrylics rather than gouache. And this one was quite simple. The rocks originally were supposed to be brown or grey, but I added too much pink and red into it, and I think that works really nicely. I think the whole colour palette of this spread works really well, even though it was a little bit of an accident. I kept the details quite simple on this one, so I didn't add too much. I do feel like I maybe added a few too many lines here, but I really like the tiny houses in the distance and some of the trees, and again I've added the patterns on the water, which I'm enjoying lately. I'm also really pleased I added these yellow flowers here in the foreground because, again, that's something I really like to do in my pieces, just to add a bit of distance, and I feel like having a distinct foreground versus background really helps with my paintings. So this one didn't take me very long, it was quite quick, and again it was another Google Maps reference, but I'm really happy with it and I'm really pleased with the colours. Day 230 is again in my A5 Talons, and this is probably one of my favourite spreads I've done in a very long time. This was drawn using one of Emma Carlisle's Patreon sessions, so she runs drawing sessions for her patrons, and this one was based on narratives, and it was kind of like a choose your own adventure, so she had 3 different images on each slide, and then you picked one of them to draw to create a story. And I don't often work in narrative, so it was very different for me to try and think of a story, but it worked out really nicely and I'm so pleased with how this spread turned out. So these were timed panels. I think they were 10 or 15 minutes each. I'm pretty sure they were 10. And I just really love some of the texture that I've captured, and like I said, I'm really pleased with the colours. Because it was a story, I made sure I had something that connected the panels, which was this tree. So you can see I've got it there, and then it wasn't in this reference on the actual image, but I added it in there because this is the main part of my story, and I'm really pleased with it. It's obviously it's not a very happy story, it's got an ominous end, but I'm really pleased with how it turned out, and I'm glad I added on the text with the brown paper. That was an accident actually, because I didn't leave enough room just to draw the text or write the text on, so I stuck that on over with the brown paper, and I think that works really nicely and adds the warmth to the page, whereas if I'd done it with white paper I don't think it would have been so successful. So for my first narrative and also my first fox, which I don't think I've drawn before, but I'm really pleased with how he turned out. I'm really pleased with this one, and it really unlocked like the narrative part of my brain when I'm creating, and you'll see that in the following day as well. So for day 231, it was another narrative piece. Like I said earlier, I don't usually spend very long on my drawings. or when I sit down to draw, I usually only give myself an hour or so. So I didn't finish the Patreon challenge with Emma from the day before. So for this day, I went back to it and did my last narrative, this time in my A4 Talon Sketchbook. And these are obviously working in a lot bigger panels because it is in my larger sketchbook, but I'm again really happy with it. I used gouache, so this is my usual way of working with the washes of gouache and then adding more details on top with Neocolor pastels and Prismacolor pencils. Again, I think these were 15-minute panels, so this one took 15 minutes, then I did these two in 15 minutes together, and then this one to end. And again, this was like the same style, so it was a choose your own adventure, pick your own references. And I'm glad I added the two up here because I think that works really nicely. I'm also pleased with the colours. You can see I've added this pink into the sky, which I think adds a lot more atmosphere. And I'm really pleased with the lighthouse as well. When I was doing it, this boat one was actually my least favourite, but I'm definitely come round to it now. And as a story, I'm really pleased with it. I didn't add the text on, so you'll know on my Instagram it does have text here and up here, but I was feeling really indecisive that day, so I actually added it on digitally in the end. And I'm pleased I did because it gave me a bit more flexibility. But now it's done, I think I am going to go back and add in the type, just because I want to remember that story and I feel like it adds a lot more to this piece rather than just keeping them as the panels. It's really nice to think of them as a story. For day 232, I was really struggling with my creativity, and I do feel like it always ebbs and flows, and I feel like the larger paintings definitely took a lot of my creative energy, and especially after the narrative pieces, which I was really pleased with. Generally, after creating artwork that sort of takes a lot more brain power, I definitely struggle the next day, and I think that's the thing with daily art challenges, is that it will come and go. So for this one, I just worked in my small 12 by 12 sketchbook and created this little landscape. So this was again a reference from Google Maps. This is on the Jurassic Coast in Dorset, and it was very, very quick. I obviously wasn't feeling very inspired that day, but I am pleased with some of the texture I created. I kept my gouache really transparent and like just as a base layer, and then I added on a lot more details with coloured pencils and Neocolors. And you can see some of the texture down here from the brush, which I really like. But I do think I overworked it a little bit. It's a little bit too messy for me. And although I do like some of the marks in the clouds, and I think that's definitely influenced from my larger paintings of using the really thick paint. So it's a little bit messy for me and probably a bit too much texture, especially in the cliffs over here. And you can see like I've kept it quite scribbly even on the house, which I usually keep a little bit cleaner. So not my favourite piece, but considering I wasn't feeling great that day, I do think it's still successful. So my last one for week 39 is day 233, and I was back in the A5 sketchbook and creating something a bit different for me. So I painted these shop fronts, and these are referenced from an Instagram account that solely shares shop fronts, and I'll pop that down below. But I don't know how I feel about this one. It doesn't feel very me, and there's definitely parts I do like, but most of it I don't. It feels very muted. It kind of feels a little bit vintage, and I think that's because of the like washed out tones that I've used, as well as like keeping things quite faded. It's kind of like an old photograph, except for obviously the very bright pink shop front. And I think that's the one I'm most unsure on because it stands out so much from the green and the blue one. The things that I do like about this one is the details, so I like the bollards and the little bike, and I'm also really pleased with the windows. It's kind of subtle and you can't always see it in the photos, but I really like that I've used the negative space there to map out some of the silhouettes. And I think that would have worked better if maybe I'd been a bit harsher with my colour and it was a bit more obvious. But the whole spread was really quite muted, and so I didn't want to make it too bold because obviously the details are bold enough anyway. So I don't really know how I feel about this one. This one actually took quite a long time, especially because I was being quite unsure of it. And I almost didn't want to post it because it doesn't feel me at all. But I do want to come back to this one and try again, especially with a timer. I think that will help keep me loose and not overthink it. And I think that will be really nice to compare, so I'm hoping to do that in the next few weeks. So that rounds up weeks 38 and 39 of my daily art challenge. At the end of these videos, I always ask for your favourite, which one you like the most, and I also share mine. So this time it is this narrative one, which has the fox, and this was like my first story, and I feel like I love the colours and I like the little story, and it just felt like I'd unlocked something in my brain. But I also really love the very big one, which is this one, so the very large painting that was like the culmination of my experiments, and I'm really pleased seeing it framed and how much of an impact it has. So I'd love to know yours down below in the comments if you wanted to share, and as always I really appreciate you watching and supporting my daily art challenge. If you want to see each piece as I create it, because obviously these bi-weekly recaps come after I've created them, then you can follow me on Instagram to see the pieces I make each day. I'll be back next Sunday with a new video, and until then I hope you have a lovely week. See you later!